Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon.
My name is Vivette Hill Wabarocha, and I am the manager of McGovern Park Senior Center. I just want to welcome everyone into our home. Want you to know that our home is your home. We are here to serve people and do the best we can by what we've been given. So thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you so much for taking your time, because we know this is an important topic, and McGovern is committed to serving the people and bringing the information that we need. Want to thank very much SOA for providing this opportunity for us to do fabulous things. I see that our CEO is in the building, and I want to thank you so much, Kathy, for being here. I would be remiss again if I did not say thank you to my direct supervisor. Laz, thank you so much for always supporting us. Finally, Pat, who is not around, I always need to give her a shout out, because I promise you none of this would be possible without her expertise. So without further delay, I want to take the opportunity to introduce to you all Mr. Nicholas. Mr. Nicholas, we have a history. Everybody knows he was very instrumental, at MPS, but he was my sister's teacher and a man that I have looked up to for a very long time. So it is an honor to be here to introduce you, say thank you so much, President Nicholas of the NAACP, for being here. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And I'm the president of the NAACP Milwaukee branch, Unit 3254. I welcome you to our Voting Rights Town Hall to inform seniors, those with disabilities, veterans, caregivers, your vote and your voice. To my immediate right, we have the esteemed Honorable State Representative Dora. To my immediate left, we have Attorney William Sulton. He's the chair of our legal redress of the NAACP and legal counsel for our Honorable Lord A. Mobby Foundation, Inc. And then to my right is Mr. Daniel Idzikowski, Program and Policy Coordinator for the Milwaukee County Department of Health and Services. Here is Minister Greg Lewis, who is the chair of Souls to the Polls. Yeah. We have Ricky Townsell, who is the chair of the Political Action Committee for the NAACP and an Army veteran. Thank you. All right, so ground rules. Each panelist will be given 5 questions. They will also be given 2 minutes to answer each question. I will rotate questions first to my left, then to my right. And I will give them numbers like number 1, and I'll start with number 1, who will be Honorable Dora. And then the last person, 5, would be whether Honorable Ricky Townsell. So I'll go left to right, all right? But we'll start this particular town hall with an opening statement from each. And we'll start with Honorable Representative Dora.
Thank you, President. Thank you all that are here, watching online.
A few words to say when it comes to voting rights, that is the brownstone and cornerstone of our democracy. And so as we move forward into this upcoming election, it is vital that we all know what our rights are, what's currently happening in the state, what's happening locally, but most importantly, what we are collectively doing to making sure that we not only vote, but encourage others to vote. And in this time where there's a lot of distrust in our democracy works, and it takes people, everyday people in our community to come out. And so thank you all for being here. I hope it is informative. And with that, I'm looking forward to this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Attorney William Sulton.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is William Sulton. I'm a trial lawyer here in Milwaukee, and my area of specialization is civil and constitutional rights. An attack on our voting rights is an attack on our democracy itself. Our country has a long, rich history of expanding the right to vote for those who are elderly, for those who are disabled, and for those who are marginalized. And what we're seeing happening now in our country, I think, requires political mobilization and also legal redress in the courts, because we have to understand that battles that were won years ago, decades ago, centuries ago, do not stay won. We must remain vigilant, and we must continue to ensure that our democracy flourishes, and we do that by marching to the polls. And in this election in particular, by mailing in ballots.
Next, we have Coordinator Daniel Idzikowski.
Thank you very much, and really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this panel. I work in the Department of Health and Human Services at Milwaukee County, and one of our charges under the Older Americans Act is to organize individuals to be advocates for older adults and also for people with disabilities. And in that charge, voting rights are fundamental, probably the fundamental right that we enjoy as American citizens. And as mentioned before, the ability to access the polls, the ability to exercise that right is under attack to a certain extent with a number of legislative and administrative proposals. And it is really our job to help inform you as members of the public to be able to advocate on your behalf, to protect your access to the polls, to protect your ability to vote, and to encourage you to exercise that right to vote. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in coalition with other organizations, and particularly in the Disability Vote Coalition, to help you advocate on your own behalf. Thank you.
Minister Greg Lewis.
Thank you. You know, if we want to talk about, helping families, family structures in our communities, health and wellness, crime and incarceration, economics, education, we want to have civic leverage. We have to vote. We have to vote because we have to vote to put people in place who are going to look out for our interests. We have to have educated votes doing that. And not only that, we have to nurture candidates that we prepare to help our communities. So we've got a long way to go in this voting, but we got to start out by just going out to vote. And that's got to be very important. We have to get into that habit, and then we have to nurture a productive way of advancing our communities through our vote.
Chairman Ricky Townsell.
Thank you, President. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to be part of this esteemed panel. 115 Psalms, verse 1 says, "Not unto me, O Lord, not unto me, but to thy name go the glory." Too many of our elected officials around the country, and particularly in Wisconsin, have forgotten that message. Too many of them are putting their own personal and political agendas, party agendas, above that of the people that they sworn to serve. They're attempting and in some cases succeeding in either making it difficult to vote or taking away the rights of certain people to vote. The NAACP Political Action Committee, we're standing on the vanguard of the battlefield of the fight to ensure that every American and every Wisconsinite and every Milwaukeean can exercise their constitutional right to vote. So we partner with various organizations and we've come up with a very aggressive, I think, aggressive action plan to make things happen. And you'll hear about it later on. Thank you.
And thank all of you. Now, the first question will go to Representative Dora. And the question is, how does the state legislature and the election commission intersect?
Absolutely. So the short version is that the state legislature is the one that writes and passes legislation, and the election commission is the one that oversees what happens. But specifically speaking, the Wisconsin Elections Commission has 6 commissioners who serve for a staggered of 5-year terms. And commissioners are appointed either by the legislator or legislative leaders or the governor. And so there is an election process where commissioners are elected every 2 years. And each term, the office of the chair and vice chair switch between members appointed by Democratic and Republican legislative leaders. Besides that process alone, the election commission works independently of the state legislature.
Thank you. Our next question is to Attorney William Sulton. The question is, briefly describe the history of voting rights and the basic right to vote.
So historically, voting in our country was restricted to few folks. But over the past several hundred years, we have engaged in a rich dialogue that has expanded the right to vote, and particularly for elderly and disabled Americans, provided assistance to help them exercise this fundamental bedrock democratic principle of the right to vote. Of course, we've had terrible challenges with Jim Crow laws and voter suppression, but until recently, that was something that was in the distant past. And what we're beginning to see now are new laws designed to enact new poll taxes, new impediments to assistance for marking ballots, for assistance in mailing in ballots, decreasing the number of polling places, limiting drop boxes. All of these are designed to restrict the vote, and all of those things I think we should be very concerned about. Any encroachment on the exercise of the vote is something that we should defend against ferociously.
Thank you. We have Coordinator Daniel Idzikowski. What newly introduced restrictive voter rights laws or bills have disability advocates expressed serious concerns about?
Well, there have been a series of bills that were introduced this past session, all of which have been vetoed by Governor Evers. But nonetheless, portent of things potentially to come, as these kinds of proposals will likely resurface again in the next legislative session. And these bills do things like polarizing the existing Wisconsin Election Commission politically by requiring, for example, the legal counsel to the Wisconsin Election Commission to be partisan, to be appointed by Democratic and Republican representatives, and not to be nonpartisan as currently required. The same thing true for staff. So instead of having a nonpartisan kind of staff election commission, you would further politicize the Wisconsin Election Commission beyond the way it is already partisan today. increasing lots of burdens administratively on election officials, including having to go through lots of additional training and looking at lines, making on-the-site reports when lines are longer, other kinds of reporting burdens, relying on information to remove people from the voter polls based on systems that have been proven not to be overly reliable, and changing the system from which they do that now. Prohibiting individuals in skilled nursing facilities from assisting people to vote. They're actually affirmatively required to assist residents to vote under federal law, and these state laws would say that that would be a crime against state law to help your resident exercise the right to vote. And indefinitely confined voters. As we know, there's litigation ongoing about how indefinitely confined voters can vote, or whether there should even be a designation of indefinitely confined voter. We worked a lot to improve a bill that was proposed to preserve our current process so that people could still designate themselves as indefinitely confined voters and still receive a ballot without the proof of voter ID. But again, the original proposals were to severely limit that right. In addition to that, just how people return their absentee ballot, again, subject of a lot of litigation today around drop boxes, but proposals that would absolutely prohibit the use of those of drop boxes, as well as other types of restrictions from people being able to exercise their right to vote through the absentee process that has been really in place for many, many, many years without any question here in Wisconsin, and to severely limit the times and the ability of the clerks to assist people in that process as well. So there's a whole host of issues with legislation that's been introduced, and I think we'll probably talk about some of the court cases, including an ongoing case that's really problematic for individuals with disabilities who are currently prohibited from returning, from having anybody help them return their ballot. So under an injunction that was put in place by a Waukesha municipal court judge and upheld by the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you are currently under the current election law, you no longer can have anyone take your ballot to the ballot box for you. And for individuals with disabilities who can put their absentee ballot in the mail or who cannot get out of their facility, they can't have anybody do that for them. So obviously their right to vote is completely erased. And so this is a big concern of ours.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Minister Greg Lewis, please tell the viewers how to protect your vote.
Well, first of all, we have to get folks to understand that your vote really does count. And we have to have a higher percentage of people coming out to vote, especially in these local elections. Because I don't think people really have a concern with you who are politicians if you don't vote. You call City Hall, or, supervisor, or, state representative, that's, or your state senator or US senator. And the first thing they ask you is, are you a voter? Where do you live? And they look you up. They want to know if you're going to have the kind of influence that would be positive or negative for them. And if we're going to protect that vote, we got to start voting. I mean, we don't have anything going on right now. I'm telling you, people can come in front of the houses in our community and do anything they want because people just aren't paying attention. And the only way that that's going to change is if we start to, you know, show our leverage in numbers and going out to vote, especially in these local elections. You know, most of the time people go out and vote in these national elections, but some of them don't even do that. Right now, we're looking for 200,000 voters who haven't voted in the last 2 national elections. We're trying to get them to come back and start to vote again this fall, especially for the senators, governors, judges, and all these positions. We're looking for them right now in Milwaukee, and Racine, Kenosha, Appleton, and Green Bay. So we started another organization called Power to the Polls so that we could have, you know, a more vigorous advocacy for getting folks back into the fold. So, you know, it's obvious that if you don't vote, people aren't going to pay attention to you. And if you're going to protect that vote, you have to use it. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And it's called purging. And I don't know if all of you know what purging is this. If you don't vote in the last couple of these national elections, they take your name off the registration roster. And you don't even know it. So when you go to vote, you go to your polling place, if you decide to vote again, you have to re-register all over again. And all this stuff is psychologically just so dismantling to a community who doesn't believe in the process in the first place. You know, we have to really consider, or should I say it like this? We need to take ourselves serious in these communities. And we need to talk to our relatives and friends and neighbors about taking themselves serious. Because if you're going to complain, you need to vote. And if you're not going to vote, please don't complain. You don't have a right to.
Thank you, Reverend.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Officer Townsell, Ricky Townsell. How does the threat of facing a felony charge for assisting individuals affect communities of color and other disenfranchised populations such as workers, veterans, youth, justice involved individuals, etc.?
Well, let me first start by saying that we're being punished because of the outcome of the last presidential election. There's a sitting United States Senator, Republican, that said, if we allow every American to vote, we'll never elect another Republican. Not all Republicans hold that view, but enough do to make it dangerous. There are over 226,000 Black people in the city of Milwaukee as of the 2019 census. 248,000 in the county of Milwaukee. Add to those numbers the number of disenfranchised people who won't be able to vote. Now, we as Black people have an inherent distrust and in some cases fear of law enforcement because of past history. We tend to avoid anything that will bring us into direct conflict with the criminal justice system because it usually doesn't come out favorable for us. So there's really no incentive for someone to go out of their way to assist those that need assistance for fear of the consequences. And like the good pastor said, it's another one of the psychological games that's being played. They already know that a good portion of us won't vote. So they're going to make it harder for those of us who do vote to vote. So that's pretty much how I see it affecting our community.
Thank you very much. But I'm now going in inverse order. So you're going to start the next question, which is, what effect will these laws have on the way organizations service the elderly, disabled, and other vulnerable populations?
For people less likely to go out of their way, like I said, to help others if they know that there is a threat of incarceration or a threat of them becoming felons, felon themselves. And of course, if you become a felon, you lose your right to vote. So that's yet another way to take away a right to vote. To avoid pitfalls in the laws that are being created, it's understandable that those people who work the polls have to go through the training necessary, and they're skilled, they're equipped and ready to avoid those pitfalls. But what about the people in assisted living facilities, the people who run those facilities, the people in nursing homes? If you have an elderly parent or some other elderly person living with you, that person is going to be, once again, even more disadvantaged. So unfortunately, those people in that class that I just mentioned don't have the opportunity or time to go get the training necessary to find out what's legal and what's not legal. Because not only are they burdened, I won't say burdened, not only do they have to take care of a loved one or whatever assisted living facility they're in, but they also have to work, you know? So I think it's a very unfortunate situation, and if we don't address this now, the laws are doing what they were intended to do, and that's not a good thing.
Thank you. Minister Lewis, could you tell us about voting rights movements and voting reform?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't have to be fighting for, rights we already should just be given. So it's kind of crazy that we still, after over 100 years, still trying to find ourselves to be treated like human beings. It's almost like we get treated differently, like we're 2/3 of people. That kind of thing is going on right now because they still haven't passed the Voting Rights Act. They still haven't done anything with that. And that's part of the reason why people really don't want to even be involved, because, who wants to be in a place where you're not welcome? That is just so frustrating. And I'm going to tell you this, the movement has to have people moving it. And not enough people are concerning themselves with it. And I can assure you that because we study voting with social polls and, our organization, we study voting. So we had this organization out west do a survey of 25,000 individuals in our community, 5 through 206, 5 through 205, 10, all those places, 25,000. And they asked them, they said, well, do you know that there's going to be a mayoral election in your city on April 5th? And 92% of the people they polled said they didn't know there was going to be an election. Now, that tells me that, we've become zombies when it comes to this voting thing. We don't think about it, we don't care about it, we don't know about it, we're not paying attention. So, I think that's part of the reason why, the folks in DC and other places are considering our wishes about a Voting Rights Act, because not enough of us are making noise about it, because hardly any of us are paying attention to it. And that is so disheartening. And it breaks your heart because we have the power. We're almost like, I think 45% of the city now. We don't have 45% of the power in our community. And, it's just discouraging for those who are encouraging folks to vote to hear people say my vote doesn't count. Well, for one thing, you haven't tried it yet. And for another thing, it's been proven in the past that it doesn't. See, this movement has got to have folks like us pushing other people to join us into calling our representatives, our senators, our assembly persons, all those people need to have phone calls made to them. If you want to push and get this movement across the desk of the president. And until that happens, people are going to keep treating us like they've been treating us. You know, I'd always say that, man, stop letting things happen to you. Start making things happen for you. You know, I remember, and I'm going to leave with this, I used to watch these Road Runner cartoons. You know, he said, beep, beep, did he run? And Wile E. Coyote was always trying to drop this ammo on his head. And then, you know, as soon as he think he had him, he just take off. Well, we're like the Road Runner, but we don't run. We just let the ammo fall on our heads. We need to continue to fight no matter what. It's always been hard. For my mother, for my parents, it was hard. It was harder than it is now. But they fought to get us where we are now. And we're inching our way to equality, but we're not nearly there. So, you know, I just say we don't have enough people fighting for our rights. And until that happens, you know, we're probably going to still continuously struggling with getting, you know, things like the voter rights, you know, amendment passed and those kind of things. So it's going to be tough, Mr. President, but we don't stop fighting.
Thank you. Coordinator Daniel Idzikowski, what resources can you recommend to individuals, family members, and organizations that will help them overcome barriers to voting?
Sure. So I just want to follow up with what the pastor mentioned. The importance, first of all, to find a way to vote. And, you know, famous disability rights advocate Justin Dark said, vote as if your life depends on it, because it does. So first of all, I completely concur with the notion that we need to organize, we need to encourage our fellow citizens to exercise their right to vote, because if we don't, we're going to lose it. So how are we helping? What are some ways that you can be involved, and we're going to try to make it easier for you to exercise that right to vote? So on the back table, I did put some materials that I think will be helpful to you. First is a little card that gives you a reminder of when the elections are and how to register to vote at myvote.wi.gov. There are some improvements. So actually during the pandemic, some of the practices that we're fighting over were actually improvements to allow more people to vote. And really a lot of what the battle is about is clawing back some of those improvements, like automatically sending an absentee ballot to all individuals in nursing homes and other care facilities. Allowing ballot boxes to be used in locations other than the clerk's office. These were kind of innovations to help people to be able to vote during the pandemic. And a lot of the legal battle is about saying, oh, that was going too far. You're making voting too easy, and to try to claw those back. So we are providing, for example, free transportation for individuals age 60 and over to any municipal clerk's office to register to vote, to the Department of Motor Vehicles if you need to get a voter ID, or to the polls, either an absentee ballot site, which now is pretty much the municipal clerk's office, or to the polls on election day. So we just asked you to call our Aging Resource Center and set up your plan to vote there, and we can get you a ride if you need a ride. Voting early is still, probably the best way to go, and there's early voting occurring right now for the April election. In Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, they're kind of getting around a little bit the prohibition on drop boxes by having staffed drop boxes. So There will be staffed drop boxes in the city of Milwaukee well, we missed the March 26th, but coming up on April 2nd, so on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at a whole series of locations throughout the city of Milwaukee. So you can go to these locations because they'll have actual municipal clerk staff there to collect your ballot, so that extending the clerk's office that way. So that's a possibility for you if you need to get out to somewhere closer. Otherwise, schedule your ride and plan to vote, on election day, or to get to your clerk's office and cast your vote that way. Make sure that you are registered to vote, and that if you moved, you've updated that information. And again, that website, myvote.wi.gov, tells you everything that's on your ballot, tells you if you're registered, tells you where your polling place is, etc. And if you don't have computer access to that, our senior centers here do have computer access. So you can come to the senior center, use the computer here, and look that information up. Our libraries offer, throughout the federated system, offer that same opportunity for you. In addition to that, there's a whole host of resources about voting on the disabilityvote.org site. That's www.disabilityvote.org. That's our Wisconsin Disability Vote Coalition. There's all sorts of great information and training materials on there that you can utilize to learn about the voting process and to help others vote as well. Finally, there's a request. And there's information also on how to fill out your ballot correctly and to put all the information necessary on both the ballot and on the envelope that it's returned in. The official instructions, I've also put copies of those, just one page, 2 sides on filling out an absentee ballot. So if you're unsure about that, this can help you. And then finally, the last thing is there is a call for voters to speak out about the ban on absentee ballot return assistance. And also on the back table is a sheet. We'd like you to call we'd like you to organize, to write letters to the editor to oppose this part of the current injunction, because the Supreme Court has yet to rule on the substance of the matter, and we need to express our voice on this. So here's some information about how to do that. And again, that sheet is on the back table. And you can always call 1-844-DIS-VOTE, 1-844-DIS-VOTE to get assistance with that kind of advocacy, but also to help you exercise your right to vote.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Sulton, could you tell us what voter suppression is and give us a few examples?
Sure. Voter suppression is a strategy. It's a strategy for denying the franchise to certain groups that somebody feels is politically unfavorable to them. The examples that you're hearing about today, I think, are the best examples and the ones that matter today. Preventing the use of drop boxes for returns unless they're staffed, limiting staffing hours for municipal clerks, limiting volunteers for municipal clerks, not following the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act by depriving folks of assistance for mail-in ballot returns. Felony disenfranchisement. It appeared at one point in time that we had a movement going on in the country to eliminate that, something that Wisconsin has done, by the way. But we're soon to be turning the clock back. Again, it's about denying the franchise to certain groups that a political activist believes is unfavorable to them. Voter ID, there will be a trial towards the end of April about Wisconsin's voter ID laws. Again, it is a strategy. And I think it's important to view voter suppression as a strategy rather than a series of independent acts, because I think that's the wrong way to look at it. But I also want to be clear that voter suppression affects us all. When you deny the franchise to one group, believe it or not, it affects multiple groups. And so we really do need to take action. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This isn't about creating more blue districts than red districts. This is about fairness and equality and recognizing that the vote is one of the ways in which we level the playing field in our society, a society that started out uneven. And really what voter suppression is about at bottom is about maintaining that unevenness.
Thank you. Representative Dora, what was the Wisconsin legislative rationale behind restricted voter bills?
Well, I can certainly assure you, as a Democrat, that was not our rationale. And so, but the reality is with Wisconsin, the majority that is running the Wisconsin State Legislature are Republicans. And so I'd love to hear what they have to say about that. But frankly, it's just a blatant attempt to minimize what our democracy really is. And fellow panelists have already shared, honestly, in great detail, the penalties just for making sure people have access to voting and making it so much harder. And if we're serious about upholding those values, not only in our communities, in the state, and quite frankly, this country, there's no reason why they should be pushing them. So I'm not entirely sure, but it is certainly nothing but a blatant attempt to push their own political agenda. And like the attorney said, voting is a way to making sure that your voice specifically is what's heard, regardless of partisan influence. I will say though that one thing that Democrats did introduce this session was to propose an automatic voter registration. So I believe Mr. Lewis talked about how, if you don't, continue to register and go to vote, they will remove you. So this piece of legislation was to ensure that every Wisconsinite does not face additional barriers to casting a ballot. I can't tell you how many times whether it's reaching out and talking to constituents or encouraging folks to vote, in other elections where they say, I don't know where my information is. And so I know I registered, or they'll go to a polling location and they're told you're at the wrong polling location. And so if it's 10 minutes to close and you just got off from work, now that person's right and ability to vote has just been disenfranchised. So long story short, there is no clear rationale of a blatant attack on our democracy, but I can assure you that at least for Democrats, we understand and see the value of our democracy here in the state.
Thank you. So, moving to the third round of questions, you will begin again. Does the state have a plan to inform seniors, disabled individuals, caregivers, and organizations of the changes of potential risk of felony for assisting?
Absolutely. So like I said, because the state, the majority is Republicans, and since they are the ones pushing this agenda, we've encouraged, honestly, have looked to our local leaders and our local clerks. It's because one, they know exactly what the needs are. They're actually working with individuals in a nonpartisan way, which should be. And so I would encourage everyone to definitely reach out to your clerks because they're the ones that are literally on the front lines doing the work, making sure that your right to vote is protected and making sure that you get accurate information. It's because there is plenty of misinformation, and that again is another tool that to discourage individuals from voting. So I'd say from the state level, reach out to your local clerks because at this time, unfortunately, there's too many state leaders giving out false information.
Thank you very much. Attorney Sulton, who is affected by voter suppression the most?
Some, it's the last, the least, the left out, and the looked over. Those who are among us who are elderly, those who are among us who are disabled, those who are sitting in jails but still able to vote, people of color, the poor, These are the folks that are most affected by voter suppression because they have the highest cost to registration, leaving their jobs in order to stand in lines for hours to vote. All of the additional costs that have been put in place. And I think it's important to listen to what Representative Drake talked about, because we often talk about some of the challenges, but I think there are some real solutions. And I think that the various municipal clerks throughout our state are the ones that are in the position to enact those solutions. And they just haven't done it yet. Part of the reason for that is, we haven't encouraged them. Maybe we haven't provided the right ideas to them, or maybe we haven't mobilized enough. But I would encourage everyone in this room and everyone listening online to really put pressure on their municipal clerks to make this right, because those are the folks who have the ability to make sure that people are not disenfranchised.
Thank you very much. Coordinator Daniel Idzikowski, what measures are being taken to assist the indefinitely confined individuals?
So under current state law, there is a provision. There are two major provisions. One, you can register as an indefinitely confined voter. And that is a self-determination that you make based upon that definition in state law. And with that comes the ability to receive a ballot at each cycle without having to re-request a ballot every single election cycle. So if you are in a nursing home facility, for example, and that is going to be your residence for as long as you know, you can register as an indefinitely confined voter and get that ballot. You also do not need to provide electronically your voter ID, your photo ID, as you do if you would register through other provisions. So there is, under current law, some assistance in that regard. Second of all, special voting deputies are mandated by state law to visit each of these facilities, one Republican, one Democrat, to go together on announced days to the facilities to let people know that they are there to assist them in completing the ballot, in completing that process, and to help them. The reason that became an issue is because during the pandemic, no special voting deputies were going to be let into the nursing homes because they were closed. And so it became more critical that staff be trained to assist people to exercise the vote. Under federal law, that is still the case, that nursing home staff should be allowed to help and assist individuals in completing their ballot. The big question now is in terms of the return of the ballot. So hopefully these laws that we do have in place do not change, and hopefully the right of individuals to be able to get assistance to return their ballot is also upheld by the court. And again, I just encourage you, as the pastor has said, as others have said, the local clerks are elected officials. So it's another reason to get out and vote, because you're voting for, even though it seems like a minor election, the importance of these individuals that they play in the voting process is enormous, because it is a very localized process. And so you vote for your clerk who runs the voting process in your municipality. So please exercise your right to vote, not just in a presidential election, but in every election, because those lower quote unquote municipal posts are super important as well.
Minister Lewis, what effect does these restrictive laws have on the voting rights movement? And give us two examples.
So, psychologically, it kills the energy of the community. I mean, it's not just one, but it's just like being bombarded with all of them. You know, people just say, man, forget it. I don't even want to be bothered. You know, and we already don't believe in the system, Mr. President. But like I said, 92% of 25,000 people didn't even know there was an election for mayor. Man, the leader of your city. Wow. I mean, you got to pay more attention than that. And then on the other side, people just want to keep power. So, you know, there's always going to be resistance, but we have to withstand the resistance. And, you know, two huge examples of restricting folks is this. First of all, this the way we align our districts. You know, the alignment right now could keep the Republican Party in power for the next century, just the way the lines are drawn. You know, even though you might have a larger population of Democrats in the state, they're not in areas where they have representation in our legislature. There's some madness there that can go on for a century. And then another one that I don't think people really are paying attention to, and it's been mentioned here, is these absentee ballots and these drop boxes. You know, that's huge. And I'll tell you why. Drop boxes are important because if you don't get them to the polling place in time, your vote won't be counted. When we had a vote in 2020, we sued, you know, Souls to the Polls and other organizations. We got together and we sued the state election commission to move the time for having the election instead of April 7th, have some other time because of the pandemic. Well, it went all the way to Supreme Court. My name was on that lawsuit. It was Lewis against them. That's why I know about it. And we didn't win moving that election date, but what happened is absentee votes got counted the next Monday after that Tuesday election. And that was 118,000 votes. You do the math. If people don't get those absentee ballots there in time, there could be thousands, tens of thousands of people whose votes won't get counted. And I bet they'll be coming right out of this community because some of them are elderly, people of color, handicapped, they don't have transportation, they're felons, procrastination. All of those things eliminate thousands of votes when you talk about absentee voting. And those two things are huge. And we're losing right now. The people are losing. So we have to stand up because we just can't keep letting these things happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Officer Townsell, what is the NAACP's next step?
You can drop the office part, Ms. Wicking. But Chairman Townsell. I think these laws are gonna make an already stressful situation even more stressful. I'm a Prince Hall Mason, and my lodge, we host the polling site on a number of elections. And it's already difficult to get brothers to come out, do the training, man the site. And it's, when I say stressful, it's stressful because people come to the polls, they don't know. I mean, we experience about everything that you could possibly experience. People coming at the wrong polling site, having to send them away to another polling site, coming not registered, coming not having the proper identification. All these things, if we can address it before they come to the polling site, that'll make our job a lot less stressful. Now add to this the fact that people who drive up, and we used to be able to go out and take their ballot from them because they can't get out of the car. We can't do that anymore, okay? So having to explain that to people. I can't take your vote because, and all of a sudden we're the ones that's saying, well, you know, taking away their voting right instead of aiming at the correct people. So it just makes a tough job even tougher. Not only while we're there for getting people to come to the site and work the site with us.
Thank you very much. We're gonna turn now to the audience. And we want you to express whatever questions you have at this time. And if you may direct it to whom you think may be the person to answer best for you. So questions, is there a microphone that we can use? Mike is in the middle. You may step there and ask a question. Anyone who wishes to ask a question at this time.
Good afternoon. My name is Bobby Thompson, Bobby with a Y. I also go out in my community to ask people to go out and vote. One big question is, who do I vote for? I don't know who to vote for. So my thing is, we need more leadership. People, they confused. They say, well, who I should I vote for? I don't know who to vote for, so that means I'm not gonna vote at all. So we have to have more leadership. And also, in my neighborhood, and other neighborhood have said this to me, because I called them up on the phone. I said, well, did you go vote? Well, yeah, but when I got there, they said I'm at the wrong voting place. So my question is, why all of a sudden everything is being redirected? Why? Why are our seniors that cannot vote on their own? When I called and said, well, who should I vote for? I can't tell them who to vote for. It's against the law. Is that right, attorney? It's against the law for me to tell them who to vote for. They don't know who to vote for. There's no leadership in our community. So where are the people that need to talk to our seniors and disabled to let them know where to go to vote? Because people have gone to vote for the primary and said, I got to the poll, they said, I can't vote here. So, and what they do now, they go back home because they were never told where they should have gone to vote in the first place. So we definitely need more leadership. Leadership. I cannot stress that enough. And I know what you all have said up there. I have good information. What you all have said in this room makes a lot of difference. Let's be frank here. Leadership. Our senior citizen here, the one that have made the bridges for us, as I'm a baby boomer myself. People that were born before 1945 are people that have made their way to make things better for us. But let's talk about this for a minute. We need more leadership. We gotta have it. Because people that have Alzheimer's, dementia, they can't vote. Can they vote? Can I tell somebody? No, I can't tell anybody who to vote for. It's against the law. Is that right, attorney? It's against the law. So who are they gonna vote for? The fact remains that we need more leadership.
Well, if you're working the polls, you can't offer an opinion on the candidates, but you certainly can as your own private citizen, and I would encourage you to do so. When I think about my life, I think about conversations I had with my father about voting, and I still have those conversations with him today, even though we live in different states. And I think that's really important to have these conversations with our neighbors. I'm sure a lot of us in 2016 woke up and said, oh boy, those are our neighbors. And so I think we have to have more conversations about who we're voting for, why. I think we have to put representatives like Representative Drake, let's put questions to her and others as to why they're supporting things. And keep in mind that when you're voting, it's not always people. Sometimes it's referendums and real issues are at stake on the ballot. You're right that we need more leadership. I think you're correct that the fact that people don't know who to vote for is an indictment on the two-party system and how the parties have failed to canvass our communities. I think you're 100% correct on that. But I think what's most important for all citizens to understand is we will never have a level playing field. We will never get things right if we don't actually vote. We do need to vote, and I don't think we should put restrictions on folks because they have Alzheimer's or any other psychological or mental disability. I think anytime the government deems somebody as unworthy to vote, that's bad news for our civil rights and civil liberties. We should have a carte blanche, everyone should vote. And I think we should make it as easy as possible. And the fact that we're having impediments in that progress is turning us backwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Person behind you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vi Hawkins. I'm an outreach grassroots person in the community and have spent many, many years with boots on the ground. So I know, and as I travel back and forth with all the community peoples and all, and I know a lot, see a lot, and I advocate for a lot. People really don't know about voting. We need to teach them about voting. We need to teach them how the legislation works. We need to teach them all of that. I ask people there where I go, who's your older person? I don't know. Who's your supervisor? I don't know. How do you expect to get anything done? And the Reverend was clear then because they just grumble, but no action. And we got to have some action in order to move forward. I say, well, do you know about the voting rights a long time ago when my mother and father wasn't able to do that? And how it got started and the importance of it then. And I say, you're becoming less and less of a citizen of this great country that you hope build, or almost build it yourself. And with the slaves and things like that, that you just letting it go by because you have stopped and let people start enabling you so you don't have to do anything. And so we need to really get out in the community as a whole. We always point the finger at everybody else, but we don't do it ourselves there. So we need to get in the community, even with the violence, with the racism and all what's happening with the young people. See, I talk to all of them and they haven't been taught. They don't even know what it is, you know. But we got to do the encouragement. We got to start over like raising a child. We got to start at the beginning and move forward then, because if we don't, the world is going to eat us up. I listened to what all you guys said. Most of it I already know because I do my research and I follow up on things and say, but it's the people that need to come. Without the people, they don't know about gerrymandering. They don't know about redistricting. They don't know about when they didn't sign the census that they was no longer going to count. They don't know about any of that kind of stuff, the importance of it. And so until we have these meetings just to talk to people and at the grassroots level, and so they can understand the importance of their action. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that? There you go, thank you now. Just to make a comment, there was a couple of weeks ago, I was actually canvassing in this neighborhood for a listening session I was having in the district, and I came by a young gentleman that was coming from Custer High School. My first question was like, are you good at young school? He's like, yeah, I got a permission slip. But I gave him my information. I was like, this is what I do. And he asked me, I don't know what a state representative does. And so those conversations, these meetings right here is exactly what we're here for. So thank you for bringing that to the session.
We're going to have closing statements for each panelist. And we're going to start again in the order in which we started. So Representative Drake, would you please start us off? And any questions pertinent to what they've already voiced, please add.
Absolutely. I forgot to mention that I represent the 11th Assembly District, which is actually the district that we're in. But in terms of wrapping comments, what was discussed here, some of the concerns and questions that were brought up. There is a dire need to invest again in civics. Minister Lewis mentioned how there's not many people that know that there's a mayoral race coming up right around the corner. And because of that, your mayor, your local officials really do have the most impact on your day-to-day lives. And even though it's something that we may think, I'm busy, I'm working, I completely understand, because if you work several jobs, trying to make sure your kids are okay, trying to make sure that you're taking care of your loved ones. It's difficult, but it gets more difficult when you don't have individuals that represent your interests, trying to address the concerns that you have. And so in closing, and especially just speaking from a state level, your engagement in your community is so important. It truly is. What's happening on the local level, and quite frankly, to the state and national, there is a strategy, an attack to minimize our democracy and more so to focus on interests that may not benefit you specifically. And I've always been taught that you look out for your most vulnerable, and that's the elderly, that's the children, those are communities of color, those that are disabled. And because of that, it takes everyone to do that piece. You know, I represent, you know, one part, but I'm only one piece of the puzzle. You all are truly that piece that will move mountains. And I encourage you all to help with us in doing this because it's important.
Attorney Sulton.
I guess I will close by saying thank you to the folks in this room. I'm a byproduct of all of the hard work that you all put in your 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. And I want you to know that I thank you for that. And secondly, that, you know, I'm here as a resource, and the folks on this stage are here as a resource, that there are social justice organizations in this community, that there are lawyers in this community that will vigorously defend your rights in the same way that you did that allowed me to become the lawyer I am today. So thank you for that.
Chairman, Idzikowski.
So I also want to thank you for coming out, for being involved. And I just want to encourage you to continue that. It really is up to you to take this message home, to share it with your family, with your friends, and to find ways that you can help others exercise their right to vote. And there are lots of ways to do that, to become involved. I also want to note that we've talked about a lot of potential legislation that was proposed that would have made it more difficult for people to vote. Every single one of those bills was vetoed by the governor. And so there is power in the process. And there are, under the law, there are none of those new restrictions enacted. The only new restriction is in place because of a circuit court decision. And that is pending litigation now before the Supreme Court. And we can still have a voice, even though it's in court, through public advocacy, because the court does pay attention at the Supreme Court level. So again, I encourage you to speak up, use your voice, be advocates. For more information, again, I encourage you, there are resources out there to learn of what the candidates stand for, like vote411.org has information on the different candidates. This is a nonpartisan issue. We are not here to say who you should vote for. We are not here to advocate for, one party or another party. Every American has the right to vote unless it's been explicitly taken away from them by a court of law or because of a particular felony conviction. Otherwise, we all have the right to vote and we need to exercise that right. So please become involved. The Commission on Aging and the Commission on Disabilities at Milwaukee County are active bodies. We have lots of volunteers who put in a lot of time to help advocate on your behalf. I encourage you to get involved with those entities as well. And you can call our Aging and Disability Resource Center at 414-289-6847 for a host of issues, but including helping you to find your way and navigate your way through this voting process. and to get you that ride to the polls if you need it. So please know that we are here to help you exercise your right, but it is ultimately up to you to bring that message to your neighbors and to actually get out there and vote. So thank you very much.
Minister Lewis, Minister Greg Lewis.
You know, when we did this, get out the vote in 20, you know, there were hundreds of news reporters from all over the world who came to interview me as the executive director of Social Polls. Some came from the Netherlands. And, you know, and I talked to them, they said, you know, in the Netherlands, you know, first of all, when you're born, you get registered to vote. And second of all, if you don't vote, you get a ticket. Really, they thought it was nuts that people are trying to stop you from voting here. That was all over Europe. They came and, you know, people stayed at my house for like weeks, and they wanted to know how we were fighting back. That's how important this is, everybody. It's important for you to fight back. And you know, it ought to be easier for us to vote. Keep this in mind. I ought to be able to go to McDonald's, order a Big Mac, give me a ballot. Fill out the ballot, drop it in the drop box, somebody will come and get it later. That's how easy it should be. It should not be more difficult. And everybody, get your young folks to come out and vote. Talk to them, tell them our history, tell them what we went through to get this vote, how we fought, how we died, how we were sprayed with water and dogs sicked on us, just so we could get the vote out. And then I want to say this, you know, if we don't keep the governor in place, you think things are bad now, they're gonna really be bad if we have a governor who will go along with the rest of the state legislature. Man, they'll probably make sure that they tie your hands when you go vote. Listen, if you need a ride to the polls, you can call us at 414. Can somebody write this down and give it to the senior citizens here and spread this word? You can call us at 414-383-1821. 414-383-1821. And we will take you to early voting. And don't forget about the drop boxes on April 2nd that you can go. And if you haven't mailed those absentee ballots in, don't do it now, because I guarantee you they may not get there. So take them and drop them at these drop box locations at the library. So yes, yeah, I'm taking somebody to City Hall today. And guess what? He fell, he cracked his eye socket, he's on 2 sticks, and he still wants to vote. So I'm taking him to City Hall today. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna video the whole trip. And I'm gonna put it on YouTube, and I'm gonna put it on Facebook and everything, so people can see the nonsense that we're going through when you ask people who are disabled and old that they have to go do this stuff themselves. That should not be happening. We have to stand up and fight it, everybody, and we have to do it together. Thank you.
Townsell.
The goal of the Political Action Committee, NAACP Political Action Committee, is basically to educate, inform, and advocate. Education being the enemy of ignorance. We educate, going to educate our constituents on not only the rights that they currently have, constitutional rights we currently have, but to the lady's questions, and I say to the young lady's question, because I'm a baby boomer too. We're also going to educate people on the issues. Not only the issues, but how candidates stand on those issues, so that people can make their own intelligent, informed decision. And that goes to inform. We're going to inform our constituents, and that's elderly, people of color, any disenfranchised person. We're going to make sure that you know what is available to you and what people stand for. And obviously, we're going to advocate for those people whose voice otherwise wouldn't be heard. Very quickly, the action plan that we've come up with thus far is we're going to continue to participate in forums like this. we're planning at least 2 town hall style meetings with the senatorial candidates, just so that we can find out what their issues are and how they stand on various issues. I'm sure the John Lewis Voting Act will come up. And the questions that will be asked of them will be questions that come from the community. It's not going to be a debate type situation. It's going to be a question and answer. We ask the questions, they give us the answers. We're willing to come, and I say we, myself, or any member of my committee who has the time, we'll come to any center like this and set up an informational booth or whatever, not to tell people who to vote for, but to tell people what the issues are once again, and what candidates are standing for those issues, and what candidates, let's put it this way, there are candidates out there and legislators out there that vote against laws to make it easier for us to vote, and the same ones who vote for laws to make it harder for us to vote. You all need to know who those people are, okay? So that's one of our missions. We're gonna have booths at various festivals, local festivals, like Look Forward to Juneteenth Day, church festivals. We're gonna have a very active summer. We're planning at least 2 marches with a press conference at the end of those marches. Representatives, probably most of the representatives you see at this table, or some might be there, but it'll be with our partners in the community to make sure that we have a very broad base of information or people to get the information out. So if you want to be a part of this very dynamic time that we're in right now and being part of the change, contact the NAACP office. There's room for you on my committee. There's a lot of work to be done in the office itself. So thank you once again for having me today.
Thank you. I'm going to make a special call at this time to Representative Drake, because she has an issue on off paper, and I'd like for her to fully explain that terminology.
Yes, so this is a misconception. So for those that are, you may have a criminal conviction, misdemeanor, or felony. In the state of Wisconsin, if you are done with your probation, extended supervision parole, you are eligible to vote. You are eligible to vote. And I think there's just kind of misconception that because of my conviction or what have you, that I can't. Here in the state of Wisconsin, if you are off and you have finished everything, you can vote. And so I want to make sure that was clear, because that's information that's not shared widely, and is something that is still a misnomer in our community.
Thank you. So at this time, I want to thank the panelists for their participation and their input, knowledge, and wisdom. But I also want to thank Mark Truesdale and our chairperson of the Technology and Media Committee, Dan Thomas, who has helped us to make sure that thousands of people are able to view, or were able to view, this webinar. And then last but not least, I feel compelled to thank Ms. Rhonda Stover. Could you stand up? You're in the audience. Could you stand up? But there's no way that I will allow her to not go unnoticed for the behind the scenes work she's done. And I'm doing it in a polite way. Thank you very much. So thank you everybody for coming. And I enjoyed being your moderator. Thank you very much. So you got something?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.